Hello everyone and welcome to Corey Loses, where today we're going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming Fall of the Republic mod by the Thrawn's Revenge team for Empire at War Forces of Corruption. This is also the team behind the Imperial Civil War mod for Empire at War and Star Wars Ascendancy for Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion. In addition to running this channel, I am also the lead developer of those mods, including Fall of the Republic, so I just wanted to take a bit to talk about some of the stuff that we announced in the announcement and FAQ thread we posted for those of you who primarily get news about Thrawn's Revenge stuff from the YouTube channel here, and to talk about a couple extra things. So, the Fall of the Republic mod is a Clone Wars mod, as well as covering some of the time before the Clone Wars, but for the first release, we're just going to be covering the 3 years of the Clone Wars. So the playable factions in that release will be the Republic and the CIS, as you'd expect. So the first release will just have the core roster, so it'll have the main ships you'd expect from the faction, and then the second release will build a bit on that, adding in some extra ships and units for them, and then the release after that we'd probably start adding in any other factions that we want to be playable. For the most part, the main conflict is the Clone Wars themselves, but there were also a couple other conflicts before the Clone Wars and even during the Clone Wars. But we're trying to take more of the same approach that we took in Imperial Civil War, where it's not just focusing on any specific war, and instead focusing on the galaxy overall, because a lot of what we do, we're more inspired by like the Total War style of doing it. So we want to represent the galaxy as a whole and all the different events that were going on at the time, and sort of look at all the what if certain events had gone differently kind of approach. And there were other groups around at the time which were potentially able to challenge the Republic for galactic control, or had certain things gone a little bit differently, would have been bigger threats to the galaxy, and that's something that we want to expand on and look at in the mod. And that's one of the things that will sort of separate Fall of the Republic from some of the other mods that are available covering the Clone Wars right now across the galaxy that we want to try to represent. For those of you who have not played Imperial Civil War before, what we do is, instead of having a typical tech research system, which there will be to some extent, the main way that you progress through the game is through firing certain events that bring you through different eras. So in Imperial Civil War, the way it works is everything is tied to the different Imperial regimes. So you kill the leaders of the Empire and then you get to the next period in the time period. But for this we'll have a mix of some stuff like that, but also some other ways to progress through the eras. We'll have a separate news post to talk about that going forward, but since we are only going to cover the 3 years of the Clone Wars in the first release, we won't go too much into that just yet. So you can expect a core roster of stuff like regular battle droids, super battle droids, Venators, Munificents. We're going to have a news post for each of the 2 factions covering their whole roster for heroes and units, so I'm not going to go too much into that just yet either. But I just wanted to give a bit of an idea of what we're doing. So the full production on the mod won't start until after Imperial Civil War 2.2 is released, because we don't want to distract too much from the development there or split our resources. What we will be doing though is building the Fall of the Republic mod off of 2.2, so all the stuff that we're working on for 2.2 will be present in Fall of the Republic as well, just converted to make more sense for the Clone Wars period and the pre-Clone Wars period. One of the more common questions we've been asked since we announced the mod is whether we'd be going into the early Imperial period. As of right now, we have no plans to do that. We're going to focus more on the Clone Wars and pre-Clone Wars instead of focusing on like the growth of the Empire and any CIS holdout stuff. That could change in the future, but for now that's not what we plan to focus on. And part of the reason that we're structuring the releases how we are, focusing first on the Clone Wars and doing sort of modular releases after that, incrementally improving and increasing on the content available, is so that we're able to change direction and focus on stuff what people want to see gets more clear, and as our own resources and priorities sort of shift. So depending on how much help we get with the mod, how much free time we have ourselves, that'll be shifting as we go. So we will cover that stuff more in depth as we get closer to actually doing it. As you can see in the background here, there is still some of the work that's being done. We're working on updating a lot of the assets that were older in ICW for use in Fall of the Republic, so the new Lucre Hulk that you're seeing at some point in this video. I'm recording the actual video clips to put in the background separately. But yeah, so we've got a couple people working on the art assets for the mods, that when we do start making the full build, we'll be able to do that as quickly and efficiently as possible. But again, right now, as far as the actual development goes, we're working almost exclusively in ICW as far as Empire at War goes. So it'll be a pretty quick process once we're done that to sort of branch that out and start building Fall of the Republic on there. There are a few files that we prepared already, but again, we're not focusing on Fall of the Republic just yet. So if you want to help us with this mod, you can contact us at thronrevenge@gmail.com. We're always looking especially for 3D artists to help move things along. If you have any experience making 3D art, textures, UV mapping, any of that, we'd love to hear from you. I think we're mostly okay as far as XML, and that's a lot of the heavy lifting is done or will have been done by then. But if you are interested in helping and you have that skill set, let us know as well. That mostly covers it. So if you do have any questions about the mod, feel free to ask them either on our forums for the mod, which are at thronrevenge.com. We do have a poll going on for Jedi heroes right now because there are more slots than we necessarily have specific Jedi we need to use, and there's dozens of Jedi available. So there's going to be a couple that we pull from which ones are just more popular with the community around the mod. So that's at thronrevenge.com/forums. Again, link in the description. But the last thing I want to talk about with this is a couple people have asked about how we plan to handle the Clone Wars cartoon, and the Clone Wars cartoon is part of both the new canon and also the Legends canon, so we will be pulling some assets from that. We'll be using some of the ships that showed up first in there as well as some of the characters because they give us access to a much more fleshed out version of especially the CIS than we'd have otherwise. So things like the Subjugator, Malevolence, and I think there's a couple other things, especially CIS heroes. But in any instances where there is a contradiction between the Clone Wars cartoon version of events and the previously existing Legends versions of events, then we will typically side with whatever makes sense for the events prior to the Clone Wars. The main example here would be, I think, the Mandalorians, the way they were handled in the Clone Wars cartoon. It's not entirely inconsistent, but there's a few areas where some of the ways it was treated in the cartoon aren't consistent with the Mandalorian Civil War. And, for example, in that case, we'd be going with the previous information rather than just the Clone Wars cartoon. But it is a valid place to take Legends information from because it is part of Legends. It existed before Disney bought out the EU or bought out Star Wars and the EU was discontinued, so we will be pulling from that as well. But I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to talk about for this right now. Again, we will have more news coming out as we get closer to the release date of Imperial Civil War 2.2, and after that point you'll start seeing a lot more news about Fall of the Republic. You'll see a lot of videos on this channel covering the development the same way that I've been doing for Imperial Civil War, and we'll also have text-based updates. But again, we're not giving out too many answers to specific questions people have been asking because, again, a lot of it is still in the planning phase, and anything that we answer right now will likely change a lot before we actually get into working directly in the mod. But if you do have a question, feel free to ask it. You may or may not get an answer right now, though, just fair warning. So thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos about Fall of the Republic coming up, as well as our other projects in Imperial Civil War and Ascendancy, as well as playthroughs of other mods that I have nothing to do with or other games that aren't Empire at War. So see you next time. Bye.